Hi everyone, I'm Dan Joseph with MRC-TV and welcome to Mic Drop, where I talk about the things that drive liberals nuts and why we need more of those things. So, pop quiz. What three letters of the alphabet do liberals hate the most? That's right, NRA. Here's how it always goes down. There's a shooting. Not in Chicago, come on, we all know those don't count. There's a shooting somewhere else involving at least one white person. Liberals predictably blame the deaths on the availability of a scary-looking firearm rather than the individual themselves. In response, they start rolling out old proposals for new gun regulations like universal background checks or bans on assault weapons or measures to determine whether a person is mentally ill or not before they buy a firearm. Yeah. Put the federal government in charge of figuring out who's crazy. That's a real recipe for success. Most recently, they used the fact that the Orlando shooter was a Muslim to propose a bill that would prohibit those on the no-fly list from being able to get a weapon. Oh, nice to see liberals finally admitting that radical is a real threat. Wait. Radical. Well, it would appear Barack Obama has officially taken over the internet. Inevitably, even if these gun control proposals get a vote, they don't pass. Once they fail, the left predictably lays the blame for the fact that these common-sense gun reforms didn't become law at the feet of their favorite boogeyman. The boogeyman of all liberal boogeymen, the National Rifle Association. In their minds, the only possible reason for Republican opposition to these measures is because Republicans are afraid of getting the NRA mad at them and cutting off funding to their campaigns. Now, for the purpose of this video, let's pretend that this conspiracy theory is true. What's in it for the NRA? Even liberals aren't dumb enough to imply that the NRA is directly responsible for killing people.
NRA, stop killing our children!
I stand corrected. Here's why the NRA opposes all of the left's efforts to implement new gun laws, even if those gun laws enjoy majority support among the American people, and why the NRA is absolutely right to oppose them. From the 1950s all the way through the 1980s and early 90s, many liberals wanted to ban all handguns. Now, nowadays, liberals would brush this off as crazy talk, but it's absolutely true. The late New York Democratic Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan proposed banning all ammunition in the late 1980s. In 1993, liberals were successful in passing the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, and in 1994, Bill Clinton signed a ban on assault weapons. Nowadays, liberals like to reminisce about these good times and insist that if we could just go back to a time when those laws were in place, they would be totally happy and the gun control movement would just disappear. Bullshit. I actually deserve that one. The reality is that these bills were a far cry from what anti-gun activists had been demanding for decades. And if public opinion was any indicator, they very well could have gotten their way in the early 60s and again in the early 90s and gotten rid of all handguns. Now, if you think the liberals have come around and changed their way of thinking on this since then, maybe you should be mentally screened before being allowed to buy a handgun. While these bills became law, the strong opposition to these pieces of legislation served to solidify American support for the Second Amendment. And in 1994, anger over the new laws helped the GOP win Congress for the first time in over 50 years. After the public turned against the left's efforts to stringently regulate handguns, liberals turned their anti-gun agenda towards keeping the assault weapons ban alive. And they failed. Because these agenda items did not work out the way the anti-gun left had hoped, the lobby had no choice but to continue to lower its expectations. But in the wake of these mass shootings, they see a new opportunity to get their gun control agenda off the ground again, but they're starting from scratch. They're hoping that eventually Republicans will cave into public opinion and pass some sort of minor gun control legislation that won't actually do anything to solve the problem. Okay, let's say they get something passed. Then there's another shooting, which there will be. The anti-gun lobby isn't going to admit that their first policies were completely ineffective. They knew the policy was going to be as useless as an ejection seat on a helicopter from the beginning. But this will give them the opportunity to do the exact same thing they did before and find new gun control legislation and try to shame Republicans into passing that. Then they'll do the same thing following the next shooting, and then the next one. The plan is to create a death-driven snowball effect. The NRA rightly understands from past experience that if you give the gun grabbers an inch, they'll take a mile, cave on new background check laws, and they will simply politicize the next tragedy to demand more gun control in an effort to get back to a place where they can once again promote truly draconian policies. Because, of course, the anti-Second Amendment crowd understands that there will always be a next tragedy. The anti-gun lobby depends on that fact. Now, if you ask current gun control advocates if they'd like to repeal the Second Amendment or want to ban handguns, they'll usually laugh it off. Get rid of the Second Amendment? No, I'm down with the founders. I love those guys. But history tells another story. That's why the NRA exists. It's to ensure that politicians don't cave to political pressure and get that snowball rolling. So the next time your liberal friends start bitching about the NRA, you tell them this. It's not just about the money. It's not just about protecting the Second Amendment. The NRA is there to protect Americans from liberals. Mic drop.